I don't like old English literature at all. I haven't found a single aspect of it that I enjoy. I don't see how learning about Romeo and Juliet will help me in any way other than in a conversation. I don't care about Romeo and Juliet. I don't care about this adaptation, this one, this adaptation. I don't care about Julius Caesar. I don't care about Edgar Allan Poe and his marriage. I don't really care about any of these. None of these interest me. Every piece of classical literature was begrudgingly sat through as I forced myself to work through tests and assignments on a subject matter that I not only didn't care about, but a subject matter that I would never need to call back on for the rest of my life. At least, that's what I thought. Well, I still think some of those things, but I didn't realize just how passionate people were about keeping old English literature in the curriculum. Not only teachers, but students want to keep this education in schools, and even enjoy the material, which honestly, I don't understand. But that's why we're here. I'm looking to challenge my predisposition against classical writings and maybe learn something new along the way. First, read it to the Washington Post to see what teachers across the nation think. In this article by Valerie Strauss, she said to spotlight on an article written by a fed-up Sacramento high school English teacher by the name of Dana Dustbeaver. She says, "I do not believe that a long-dead British guy is the only writer who can teach my students about the human condition. I do not believe that not viewing Romeo and Juliet or any other modern adaptation of a Shakespeare play will make my students less able to go out into the world and understand language or human behavior. Mostly, I do not believe that I should do something in the classroom just because it is, quote-unquote, always been done that way." Honestly, I agree with Miss Dana completely. She's saying that Shakespeare and supposedly coveted writers and playwrights like him aren't the only ones who can get across the complex themes of the human condition. She goes on to say, Shakespeare lived in a pretty small world. It might now be appropriate for us to acknowledge him as a chronicler of life as he saw it 450 years ago and leave it at that. Again, I couldn't agree more. While I believe the lifestyles and climates of the classical writers should be acknowledged and analyzed, there's no reason to spend like 4 years doing it. As a direct response to this post, another Washington Post article called "Why It Is Ridiculous Not to Teach Shakespeare in School" was posted shortly after. This post included a response email by Matthew Truesdale, an English teacher in South Carolina. He opens saying Dana Dustbeaver is doing a disservice to teachers and students alike, and goes on to say that one of the main reasons to read a Shakespeare play is simply for the privilege of telling others you've read a Shakespeare play. Okay? But Mr. Truesdale does make a good point when he says, so what Shakespeare wrote 450 years ago is not applicable to our teaching today? Ethnically diverse students don't foolishly fall in love and over-dramatize every facet of that experience, or feel jealousy or rage, or fall victim to discrimination, or act desperately out of passion? To dismiss Shakespeare on the grounds that life 450 years ago has no relation to life today is to dismiss every religious text, every piece of ancient mythology, so on and so forth. He has a point. If you dismiss something because it's old, that doesn't mean what ground it covers isn't at all applicable to our modern society. So we've got good points on both sides, but these people are, like I said, across the nation. I interviewed 3 friends and 3 teachers on what they think about old English literature, how it fits into the curriculum, and whether it should be here or not. Do you enjoy or find old English literature engaging at all? If so, what do you like about it?
I personally do enjoy old English literature because it has a big portion of acting in it as well, and it's very emotional, very rich in emotion, so I like that.
I do like it. It's really intriguing to me because as an actor, I'm gonna have to use it in an audition or a contest at some point, so it does interest me in that way.
In my opinion, I don't really find it interesting because it doesn't have anything to do with my daily life.
A useful thing that you can learn from old English literature is how to compose a story, how to make a story and make likable characters.
Probably the only useful things that I see that we learn in English literature is basically the history from it, but not really anything else.
Do you think these things that you learn will be applicable in life?
It genuinely depends on what you want to pursue. Like if you want to be a screenwriter or if you want to just be a writer in general, making stories, then reading Old English literature would be very useful because you would be able to, like I said, learn how to compose a story, make good characters, and create a beginning, middle, and end.
I don't think they're essential to this day because now we live in more of a modern society, so Old English literature is like more of past views.
What do you think about the twisted sexual themes in a lot of Old English literature, like incest, rape, marrying underage?
I never understood why the school systems would make us learn that, but there's so many other things that they try to block out, but we can learn about rape and incest, which is kind of disgusting.
Well, I feel like it happens in the world. So we're going to have to learn a bit about it at some point. Although it's not okay, it's a subject we're going to have to talk about later at some point in our life.
I feel like you can't really change that because that was how they thought, and that's just how their society was back then. So I don't really have a particular thought in it, whether I dislike it or care for it. It's just how it is.
Do you feel Old English literature is in any way relevant or relatable to you?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who says Old English literature is absolutely essential to students today, or Old English literature is relevant and relatable to this new generation?
I would tell them to actually look at the new generation because primarily all of the students have no interest or just don't feel like it applies to them in any way.
Do you feel it's essential for all of your students to learn Old English literature?
I do. I really believe that we need to have the classics in the classroom. I believe that that there are so many stories, especially when you start talking about Shakespeare, there are so many stories that were inspired by his stories.
I don't know if I'd say it's essential for them to learn Old English literature, but it certainly is enriching, I think, to their lives and to the lives of those around them.
I don't know if I would say that it's essential. What I do feel is essential is that students have a well-rounded knowledge and understanding of the literature of various cultures and various time periods. Whether or not we include Old English in that, not necessarily so.
What would you say to someone who has complaints about the twisted sexual themes in a lot of Old English literature, like incest, rape, marrying underage?
Well, like I said earlier, those are all relevant human themes that still go on today. Unfortunately, especially in today's Me Too movement, rape and sexual assault and that sort of thing are still going on.
Those are things that do go on even today. But yeah, I find many of them problematic, and I kind of take issue with how they may be dealt with. And a lot of times that may depend on the teacher that's teaching it, how they're teaching it, how they're explaining it, whether it's considered normal behavior, what's considered normal behavior, and different things of that nature. So yeah, that can be deeply problematic.
What would you say to someone who says Old English literature is inessential to students today, or Old English literature isn't relevant or relatable to this new generation?
He visits the same themes. People are exactly the same. Being in love is just like it was then.
First, I would probably say something like poppycock or balderdash or some other really good old Shakespearean word. But then I would try to help them understand that just because you might have to work a little harder to get a text or to relate to it, sometimes that hard work pays off in a fuller, richer, deeper understanding.
There's a larger question that I see in that, and that is the relevance to certain populations of students. So for example, what does it mean to an African American child who knows Shakespeare but doesn't know the works of Ahmed Baba? You have students who are centered in European cultural thought and literature, but they're not centered in their own. And yet they're being sent out into an increasingly diverse world, into an increasingly diverse nation, where the curriculum has been largely based on European classics. Well, what about the classics of other cultures? And have we, in a sense, culturally disabled students when they know about the best of European literature but know nothing about their own?